Ohio by...
The FBI and the Department of Justice illegally spied on Team Trump during the presidential campaign, on the day he took the oath of office, and for the first 9 months of his administration.
What we are witnessing is the greatest law enforcement scandal in the history of the United States. Make no mistake about it. What the FBI under James Comey did, and under Obama, and the senior officials at the Justice Department did, was violate the civil rights of dozens of people with impunity for one reason: to get Donald Trump.
3 words sum up the illegal spying.
It's abuse of power. Abuse of power.
Welcome to One America News Investigates. John Spiropoulos reporting. The FISA spying on Team Trump is laid out in the Inspector General's 434-page report. Believe me, you wouldn't mistake this for a spy novel, but it is a chilling story of an unconscionable abuse of power by the FBI and the Department of Justice. Over the next hour, we'll get into the details, but first, a brief preview. Smears, spies, and lies were aimed at Team Trump. Former British spy Christopher Steele compiled a dirty dossier about Donald Trump. It was all rumors, bar talk, and jokes fed to Steele by someone identified as the primary subsource in the Inspector General's report. The Clinton campaign paid for the dossier. Opposition research is legal. What's not is what the FBI and Justice Department did with it. Here's the scene of the crime: the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. It was created by the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, FISA for short. The court issues search warrants, commonly referred to as FISAs. You'll hear a lot of that in this program.
FISA
warrant.
FISA authority.
So when you hear the term FISA, people are talking about a search warrant. But this isn't just any search warrant. It is, as we'll soon see, sophisticated, highly intrusive electronic surveillance. Government investigators wanted a FISA warrant on Carter Page, a former Trump campaign advisor. The FBI and Department of Justice submit a search warrant application to the FISA court, asserting there was probable cause to believe that Page was an agent of a foreign power, that Page was an intermediary between Russia and the Trump campaign in a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation. The problem? The FISA request was based on Christopher Steele's dossier. The information in the dossier was not corroborated by Steele, by his primary subsource, or by the FBI. Yet the FBI and Department of Justice told the court the FISA was true and correct. It wasn't.
Basically, they lied to the FISA court to get a surveillance warrant of an American citizen.
What has been described as a few irregularities becomes a massive criminal conspiracy over time to defraud the FISA court, to illegally surveil an American citizen, and to keep an operation open against a sitting president of the United States.
4 FISAs were issued against Carter Page. All 4 were based on lies. The lies in the dossier paid for by the Clinton campaign.
Throughout every one of the filings, DOJ and the FBI didn't inform the FISA court that this was being paid for by the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Is that right?
That's not in any of the FISA applications.
So they didn't tell the court that.
The Inspector General found the FBI and DOJ committed 17 significant errors and omissions in those FISAs.
Well, there's no doubt that these were not errors and mistakes. These were purposeful misdeeds committed by senior levels of the FBI under Obama and the Department of Justice.
This report, FISA Spying on Team Trump, is divided into 10 chapters. We'll cover how spying on Page allowed snooping on Trump's inner circle, the FBI's use of a wired-up undercover operative on the campaign, and how the FBI bungled the case by missing Page's connection to another 3-letter agency. We'll go to Capitol Hill for 2 Senate hearings on the Inspector General's findings. And finally, a program note. Our quotes and summaries from the IG report will cite the page number. Let's turn now to the virtually unnoticed and least understood part of the spying, and that is, it wasn't really about Carter Page. Oh, his name is on the search warrant, but after a few months of spying on him, some FBI agents, as noted on page 212 of the IG report, wondered why they were bothering with him. Agents told the IG, quoting now, Carter Page was a distraction in the investigation, not a key player, and was not critical to the investigation. And yet, the spying continued for 6 more months. Why? Because Page was the communications gateway to spy on Trump's inner circle. The FBI conducted the most intrusive and widespread spying of a presidential campaign in history. The FISA warrant did more than spy on Carter Page. It reached deep into the Trump campaign. Here's how. First, the FBI collects Page's phone calls, text messages, emails, and more. But it doesn't end there. FISA spying doesn't focus on just the target, Page in this case. It casts a much wider net. So next, the FBI grabs the calls, texts, and emails of everyone in contact with Page. So the FBI is spying on all of Page's friends, relatives, colleagues, and of course, the FBI is spying on all of the Trump campaign co-workers Page contacted.
That's what they did with Carter Page, and they used the Carter Page FISA to get his access to all the other people that he was communicating with. In essence, they were spying on hundreds of people, not just Carter Page.
Former U.S. Attorney Joe DeGenova explained the long reach of FISA spying during an interview at One America News Studios in Washington, D.C.
Once you get that type of surveillance on a FISA warrant, you get everything. You get phone calls, you get wiretaps, you get phone call records, you get email records, you get text messages. You also get physical spying. You can physically pursue an American citizen both in this country and overseas. But you also get access to all the other people that he or she is communicating with. So the answer was they got everything. They got content, they could get content if they wanted it, and they got all the telephone numbers and everything else that they wanted. It was a massive, massive illegal spying effort.
We know Page was in touch with Steve Bannon, the CEO of the Trump campaign, so the FBI could collect all of his communications. That could easily have been Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway, National Security Advisor Michael Flynn, the vice presidential candidate Mike Pence, Donald Trump Jr., another member of the inner circle, and of course, the candidate himself. The FBI listened to phone calls and read emails, texts, and more. Attorney General William Barr first mentioned spying on the campaign at Senate hearings in April 2019.
I think spying on a political campaign is a big deal. It's a big deal.
So you're not suggesting, though, that spying occurred?
I think spying did occur. Yes, I think spying did occur.
Well, let me...
But the question is whether it was adequately predicated. And I'm not suggesting it wasn't adequately predicated, but I'd need to explore that.
The Inspector General explored it and found the FBI and Justice Department made 17 significant errors and omissions in the Carter Page FISA case.
They got the original FISA based on the Steele dossier, which they knew to be a false and fraudulent document, means that the first FISA warrant was illegal, and all 3 subsequent ones were illegal. They had no legal right to spy on Carter Page and conduct FISA surveillance.
I think the heart of the IG's report really focused on how the investigation was conducted once it got going, and that is especially the very serious abuses of FISA that occurred.
NBC News asked Barr about his earlier congressional testimony on spying.
Do you still stand by your statement that the campaign was spied upon?
Well, it's clearly spied upon. I mean, that's what electronic surveillance is. I think wiring people up to go in and talk to people and make recordings of their conversations is spying. I think going through people's emails, which they did as a result of the FISA warrant, they went through everything, from Page's life.
He wasn't in the campaign at the point where
they
began the surveillance.
Yes, but his emails go back. I mean, the main reason they were going for the FISA warrant initially was to go back historically and seize all his emails and texts and all that stuff from back months and even years. So they were covering the period that he was in the campaign, and that's exactly the reason they went for the FISA, to get that stuff.
After a year of spying, the FBI found nothing incriminating on Carter Page, candidate and later President Trump, or anyone else involved with the campaign. What it did find was none of the FBI's business. Trump campaign advisors discussing political strategy, plus their highly personal calls, texts, and emails with spouses, children, and others. Coming next, we go back to the beginning. What launched the Crossfire Hurricane investigation and the spying on Team Trump that soon followed? A vague comment at this wine bar in London triggered the FBI's crossfire hurricane investigation into the Trump campaign. That's the FBI's story. Trump advisor George Papadopoulos said something to Alexander Downer, Australia's ambassador to the UK.
Trump campaign foreign policy advisor George Papadopoulos suggested the Trump team had received some kind of a suggestion, close quote, from Russia that it could assist in the election process with the anonymous release of information during the campaign that would be damaging to candidate Clinton and then President Obama.
That's it. Over drinks, Papadopoulos suggested the Trump team had received some kind of a suggestion. Listen again.
Quote, suggested the Trump team had received some kind of a suggestion, close quote, from Russia.
Apparently, the FBI only needs a whiff of suspicious third-hand hearsay to start a counterintelligence op.
While the information in the FBI's possession at the time was limited, we found that Crossfire Hurricane was open for an authorized investigative purpose and with sufficient factual predication.
The FBI soon wired up an undercover operative. He recorded conversations and tried to prompt incriminating evidence from Papadopoulos. He did the same with Carter Page, another Trump campaign advisor. The FBI got nothing. Attorney General William Barr was not surprised. He thought the FBI's case was weak to begin with.
There has to be some basis before we use these very potent powers in our core First Amendment activity. And here, I felt this was very flimsy.
Barr's assessment of the case can be summed up in 2 words.
Very flimsy.
The FBI based its case on Ambassador Alexander Downer's recollection of a vague comment.
They get this information that this somewhat vague statement was made in a bar. And they jumped right into a full-scale investigation before they even went and talked to the foreign officials about exactly what was said. They opened an investigation of the campaign, and they used very intrusive techniques.
The surveillance of Papadopoulos and Page was overkill.
Well, that's not what you do in any counterintelligence case. You go and you talk to people, you brace them, you try to scare the living hell out of them. And when it involves a presidential campaign, you certainly do not start a counterintelligence investigation first. You go to the campaign, you give them a defensive briefing, you tell them they may have a problem with one of their volunteers, and you give them an alert. They didn't do that to Donald Trump.
So why no defensive briefing for Team Trump? The FBI's official explanation is on page 55. Basically, it's this. The FBI didn't want to tip off a possible Russian collaborator in the campaign. Attorney General Barr found that to be a poor excuse.
And there certainly were people in the campaign that could be trusted, including a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee and the governor of New Jersey, a former U.S. attorney. There were people to talk to.
While the FBI didn't talk to the campaign, the CIA chief John Brennan did talk to the Russians.
He calls the head of Russian intelligence and says, "We know what you're up to. You better stop it."
Let's flash back to Brennan discussing his call to the head of Russian intelligence.
I said American voters would be outraged by any Russian attempt to interfere in the election. I told Mr. Bortnikov that if Russia had such a campaign underway, it would be certain to backfire.
So they go and confront the Russians, who clearly are the bad guys, and they won't go and talk to the campaigns and say, what is this about?
Anyone else's campaign would have received a defensive briefing.
They didn't do that to Donald Trump, and there was a reason they didn't do that. This was a fake counterintelligence investigation from day one. And whatever Michael Horowitz says about the predicate for beginning the counterintelligence investigation, you would never begin a counterintelligence investigation of a presidential campaign on this piece of information from George Papadopoulos. It's sloppy, incoherent information.
Sloppy and incoherent to start, and it went downhill from there. That's the subject of our next report. July 31st, 2016. The FBI opens the Crossfire Hurricane investigation. It targets Trump campaign advisors George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Michael Flynn, and Paul Manafort.
What the hell happened after they opened it up? What did they find? Were their suspicions validated? Or did they find at every turn it's really not true and they ignored it?
Here's the short answer. The FBI's suspicions were never validated. Exculpatory evidence was ignored. The IG's report lays out the same answer in 434 pages of devastating detail. Let's flash back to FBI headquarters in August 2016. What happened?
One of the first things they tried to do was to get a warrant under the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act to follow Carter Page, a volunteer for the campaign and American citizen. They applied for the warrant internally in August of 2016, and the lawyers say you don't have enough. Why? Because they had nothing.
With just 50 days to the election, the Crossfire Hurricane team gets its hands on the Steele dossier.
In September 2016, immediately after the Crossfire Hurricane team received reporting from Christopher Steele containing allegations regarding Page's alleged activities with certain Russian officials, FBI attorneys advised the department that it was ready to move forward with a request to obtain FISA authority to surveil Page.
So on September the 19th, for the first time, they introduced the Steele dossier into the warrant application process. It worked. September the 21st, they get a sign-off, let's go get a warrant. The dossier got them to where they wanted to go. Without this dossier, they go nowhere. With it, they're off to the races.
Let's take a look at page 126 of the Inspector General's report. It states, the FISA request drew almost entirely from Steele's reporting in describing the factual basis to establish probable cause to believe that Page was an agent of a foreign power.
We concluded that the Steele reporting played a central and essential role in the decision to seek a FISA order.
The FISA's most damning quote-unquote facts about Carter Page came from the dossier. The IG report details them starting on page 129. The key quotes from the dossier are on page 130. Page was an intermediary between Russia and the Trump campaign's manager in a well-developed conspiracy of cooperation, and that Page has professional relationships with known Russian intelligence officers. All 4 FISAs against Page were based on the dossier, a document Senator Graham held up in disgust.
If you read this document, the first thing you would think of is they got something on Donald Trump. It is stunning, it is damning, it is salacious, and it's a bunch of crap.
Attorney General William Barr used less colorful language.
They were told they didn't have probable cause to get a warrant, and so they took the Steele dossier, which they had done nothing to verify, and they used that to get the warrant.
Let's underline 6 key words Barr used about the dossier. Quote, they had done nothing to verify it. Listen again.
They took the Steele dossier, which they had done nothing to verify.
It was critical for the FBI to verify the dossier because, as the IG reports, Steele was not the originating source of any of the factual information in his reporting. Steele relied upon a primary subsource who used a network of subsources.
What you need to know, this is not what Steele found himself. This is what he gathered from one person.
Neither Steele nor the primary subsource had direct access to the information being reported. So the dossier, the basis for all 4 FISAs, was just multiple levels of hearsay. The court was led to believe that the FISAs were factual. They were not.
Where was the oversight when the FBI didn't bother to confirm any of the claims in the Steele dossier before presenting them to the court as evidence to surveil Carter Page?
Bill Priestap led the FBI team trying to confirm the Steele dossier. Priestap told the IG, we absolutely understood that the information could be inaccurate. Priestap also considered it might be part of a Russian disinformation campaign. Quote, we did not ever take the information he provided at face value. We went to great lengths to try to independently verify the source's credibility and to prove or disprove every single assertion in the dossier. The FBI's Crossfire Hurricane team tried for a year and failed. As the IG states on page 383, the FBI was unable to corroborate any of the allegations against Carter Page. The Inspector General did not name names, but a lot of people at the FBI knew the dossier wasn't verified, and yet still included Steele's information in the FISA applications.
We now know that in October and then 3 times late, October 2016 and 3 times in 2017, these individuals deliberately, knowingly misled the FISA court. I mean, that's really the nicest way to put it. Basically, they lied to the FISA court to get a surveillance warrant of an American citizen.
There's actually a federal law and Department of Justice policy that the government must tell the truth to the FISA court, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Did it? No. Here's a copy of the first Carter Page FISA. It's heavily redacted. Take a look at the verification page. There, an FBI supervisory special agent, whose name and signature is blacked out, attests to the FISA's accuracy. Quote, "I declare under penalty of perjury that the foregoing information regarding Carter W. Page is true and correct." End quote. Was it? No.
We found that investigators failed to meet their basic obligation that the FISA applications be scrupulously accurate. We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications, 7 in the first FISA application, and a total of 17 by the final renewal application.
They got the original FISA based on the Steele dossier, which they knew to be a false and fraudulent document, means that the first FISA warrant was illegal, and all 3 subsequent ones were illegal. They had no legal right to spy on Carter Page and conduct FISA surveillance.
The FBI wanted to spy on Carter Page and the rest of Team Trump, and it didn't let the facts, or the lack of them, get in the way. But the failure to corroborate the Steele dossier was just the beginning of the abuse of power. As the IG states, it found 7 significant errors and omissions in the first FISA warrant. Number 1 on the IG's list will leave you shaking your head. That's next. The FBI's biggest blunder in the case against Carter Page occurred in all 4 FISAs. The FBI used the uncorroborated Steele dossier as the basis for all the search warrants. The FBI believed Carter Page was acting in conjunction with the Russians to undermine and influence the upcoming U.S. presidential election, and that there was probable cause to believe that Page was an agent of a foreign power. So was Carter Page really a foreign agent? No. He was actually a longtime source for the U.S. Central Intelligence Agency. The CIA gave that vital information to the Crossfire Hurricane team in August 2016. But the FISA court was not told that
the Carter Page had been approved as an operational contact for that other agency from 2008 to 2013.
Horowitz never mentions the CIA by name, only as that other agency.
That Page had provided information to the other agency concerning his prior contacts with certain Russian intelligence officers, and that an employee of that other agency assessed that Carter Page had been candid with them. The FBI never followed up on that information.
Why does that matter? Because if the court had known, then there's a lawful reason for Mr. Page to be talking to the Russian guy. He wasn't working against his country, he was working with his country, which undercuts the idea he's a foreign agent.
Page's CIA links were not disclosed in the first FISA in October 2016, nor in the first 2 FISA renewals in January and April of 2017. Meanwhile, leaks to the media portray him as a suspected Russian spy or a foreign agent. 1,000 denials won't make the smear disappear.
So Carter Page in the summer of 2017 is trying to tell anybody and everybody, I was working with the CIA, I reported my contact with this person, and nobody believed him. The CIA had told the FBI it was true earlier, but it never made it through the system.
Page's public statements get the attention of the Crossfire Hurricane team, one agent in particular. The IG report identifies him only as Supervisory Special Agent 2, or SSA-2. That's done to protect his identity. SSA-2 was the affiant on the first FISA renewal in January 2017. That means, as stated on page 208, he signed the affidavit affirming under penalty of perjury that the information was true and correct. SSA-2 also signed off on the FISA renewal in April 2017. And in June 2017, he was preparing the third FISA renewal. And wants to know if Page is telling the truth. Did he work with the CIA? SSA-2 told the IG he wanted a definitive answer before signing the next FISA. So he asked FBI attorney Kevin Kleinsmith to double-check with the CIA. Unknown to SSA-2, a CIA liaison officer had previously confirmed Page was a source for the agency.
When the lawyer had the discussion with the agent, and the agent said, "I want to see it. Do you have it in writing?" The lawyer said he did, and he forwarded the liaison's email, but altered it to insert the words "and not a source" into the email.
So he doctored it.
He doctored the original email from the liaison.
It made it look like the CIA denied knowing Mr. Page.
It flatly stated that he was not a source.
Okay, now just imagine, folks. You're representing somebody as a defense attorney and they do this to one of your clients.
A lawyer at the FBI creates fraudulent evidence, alters an email. That is in turn used as the basis for a sworn statement to the court that the court relies on. Am I stating that accurately?
That's correct. That is what occurred.
Why did Kleinsmith doctor the email? His anti-Trump instant messages after the election offer clues. Senator Graham read a few.
I just can't imagine the systematic disassembly of the progress we've made over the last 8 years. The Obama administration. The crazies won finally. This is the Tea Party on steroids. Why did he doctor the email? Did it have anything to do with the way he sees Donald Trump's presidency? You know what? It really doesn't matter what he was thinking. It matters what he did.
The IG referred Kleinsmith to the Justice Department for criminal prosecution. Days before the election, there's another media story about the dossier. This time it's in Mother Jones magazine. It's titled, "A Veteran Spy Has Given the FBI Information Alleging a Russian Operation to Cultivate Donald Trump." The FBI asked Steele if he was the source. He says yes. That's cause for firing him, and they did on November 1st. So now the FBI is spying based on the work of someone it just fired. Can things get any worse for the spy team? Yes. Election night 2016. Donald Trump wins, but the FBI won't concede. It's still trying to prove what's in the Steele dossier. So the FBI meets with Bruce Orr, a top Justice Department official. Orr knows Steele from past cases, but has no official role in this case. However, Steele has given portions of the dossier to Orr, and they discussed it. So can Orr salvage the dossier's credibility? No. According to the IG report, page 280, Orr warns that Steele's reporting of Kremlin activities may be exaggerated or conspiracy theory talk. So Steele cannot know whether all of the reporting is true.
If you'd spend 30 minutes looking at Christopher Steele, you would understand this guy is biased.
Orr also told the FBI that Steele was desperate that Donald Trump not be elected. As a British citizen, Steele couldn't vote, but he's collected $95,000 for being an FBI source and didn't want to lose that income.
Steele told Orr that if Trump won the elections, Steele's source network may be in jeopardy by a new FBI director and new agency heads appointed by Trump who would have a higher degree of loyalty to the new president and could decide to take action against Steele and his source network. Let me tell you about Christopher Steele. Orr was right. He was on a mission to get Donald Trump.
By late November 2016, Steele has no credibility. But if the FBI could find Steele's main source for the dossier, there might still be a case against Team Trump.
What you need to know, this is not what Steele found himself. This is what he gathered from one person.
Steele wouldn't reveal his source, but the FBI figured it out. London, January 2017. The FBI and Justice Department interview the person known as the primary subsource. The major findings are revealed starting on page 187 of the IG report. The primary subsource says there is zero corroboration of the information in the dossier.
What does the Russian guy tell the FBI about the dossier? That Steele misstated or exaggerated the prime subsource's statements? That Trump's alleged sexual activities at the Ritz-Carlton Hotel in Moscow was rumor and speculation.
In January, after the election, the entire case collapsed when the principal source says, I never told Steele this stuff.
The primary subsource didn't have any first-hand information, merely gathered information from a network of subsources, and there was no proof to support the statements of subsources.
They were word of mouth and hearsay, conversations had with friends over beers, were statements made in jest that should be taken with a grain of salt. So in January 2017, the person who did all the assembling of the information for the now famous Steele dossier tells the FBI, I disavow everything in there. Now, what should happen? Time out? Let's reassess? Maybe we got this wrong? What would you hope to happen? That the FBI would slow down? Because this is the outcome determinative document that's just had a hole blown through it. They don't slow down. They use the document they now know to be a bunch of garbage twice more to get a warrant against Carter Page.
Graham called for a criminal investigation of the FBI team who interviewed the primary subsource.
The 5 people who heard the subsource disavow the dossier need to be investigated criminally. And I want to know who they told, if anybody, about what they found. Why didn't they tell the court about the exculpatory interview? Why did they lie to the court?
Meanwhile, the spying on Team Trump continued for 9 more months. The FBI did more than spy on the campaign from a distance. Coming up next, the story of a wired-up undercover operative. While the FBI had its suspicions about Carter Page and George Papadopoulos, it had no evidence. So the Bureau wired up an undercover operative to secretly record them.
Shortly after the FBI opened the Crossfire Hurricane investigation, the FBI monitored meetings and recorded several conversations between FBI confidential human sources, or CHSs, and individuals affiliated with the Trump campaign.
The IG report does not identify confidential human sources by name. Instead, they are referred to as Source 1, Source 2, etc. Page 317 describes Source 2's meeting with Carter Page. Meet Source 2, Stefan Halper. His identity was revealed in the media months ago. He's worked for several Republican presidents. He has long-standing ties to U.S. intelligence agencies, and he has a reputation as a foreign policy expert. Perfect cover for engaging and recording conversations with Page and Papadopoulos, Trump campaign foreign policy advisors at the time.
I received an unsolicited email in September of 2016 from a man named Stefan Halper, who was suggesting that he wanted to pay me $3,000 to write a report on energy security questions that I was a recognized expert on at the time. And I looked him up. I'd never heard of him before. I just saw that he had worked in 4 U.S. administrations, and he was a professor at Cambridge. So I accepted his offer. He flew me to London, where he paid a 5-star hotel, my flights.
Papadopoulos checks into the Connaught Hotel on September 15, 2016. Later that day, he meets Halper at the prestigious Travelers Club. Little did Papadopoulos know the FBI was recording every word. Halper probes for incriminating information. The IG report includes portions of the FBI transcripts on page 331. Halper asked whether help from, quote, WikiLeaks or the Russians could be incredibly helpful to the Trump campaign. Papadopoulos says, as a campaign, we don't advocate for this type of activity, because at the end of the day, it's illegal. Our campaign is not engaging or reaching out to WikiLeaks or whoever to collaborate. There's no collusion, and it's going to remain that way. The FBI recorded 2 Halper meetings with Papadopoulos that day, none of it incriminating. In fact, just the opposite. The FBI also recorded Halper meeting with Carter Page. 4 meetings, hours of conversation. Again, nothing incriminating.
From day one, remember, they say, okay, we're not going to go to talk to the campaign. We're going to put people in there, wire them up, and have these conversations with people involved in the campaign, because that way we'll get the truth. That happened. That happened in August, September, and October. and it all came back exculpatory.
The IG found the FBI and Department of Justice made 7 significant errors and omissions in the first FISA. 3 of the 7 major mistakes involved those undercover recordings. The court was not told about exculpatory statements made by both Page and Papadopoulos. Follow the money. That's what Deep Throat advised Washington Post reporters during the Watergate scandal. Deep Throat, as it turned out, was Mark Felt, the number 2 man at the FBI. Did Jim Comey's FBI take Deep Throat's advice, follow the money, and tell the FISA court who paid for the Steele dossier? No.
Throughout every one of the filings, DOJ and the FBI didn't inform the FISA court that this was being paid for by the DNC and the Hillary Clinton campaign. Is that right?
That's not in any of the FISA applications.
So they didn't tell the court.
Let's flash back to 2016. The Clinton campaign and the Democratic National Committee paid Perkins Coie, a Washington law firm, to do opposition research on Trump. The law firm hired Fusion GPS, which hired Christopher Steele. Steele was already getting paid as a confidential human source for the FBI. London, July 5, 2016. Steele shows part of the dossier to Michael Gaeta, his FBI handler. Gaeta told the IG Steele informed him that Fusion GPS had been hired by a law firm to conduct research. Steele stated that he did not know the political affiliation of the law firm, but it was obvious to Gaeta the request for the research was politically motivated. That conversation was July 5, 2016. Let's fast forward to London, October 2016. Steele meets with the FBI Crossfire Hurricane team. In his IG interview, Steele said he told the FBI his research was being paid by people seeking to prevent Trump from being president. But the IG found that the FBI didn't follow the money. Take a look at page 383, footnote number 506. The FBI did not focus much attention on seeking to identify the client of Fusion GPS that was funding Steele's research. Why didn't it follow the money? The IG interviewed the FBI supervisory intel analyst, who stated he was aware of the political influences on the reporting by Steele, but that further research on the issue was nearly immaterial. But Justice Department lawyer Stuart Evans thought it was important. Twice he asks the FBI, is Steele linked to either campaign? The FBI is evasive, so he asks again. Evans told the IG that on October 11th, he learned for the first time from the FBI that Steele had been paid to develop political opposition research.
On October 11, 2016, after they were asked 3 times by a DOJ attorney, the FBI responded that Steele, and I'm quoting now, had been paid to develop political opposition research. This is right at the time that the FBI was going to the FISA court and asking for a surveillance warrant in the middle of a presidential campaign, correct?
That's correct.
So the FBI absolutely knew where this was coming from.
Was the FISA court told it was Oppo research? Not really. The FISA application included a few vague lines of text inserted in footnote number 8 of an 83-page document.
Christopher Steele is working for a company to find dirt on Trump, and the money comes from the Democratic Party. Did they tell the court this? No. Is that a bit unnerving? Would be to me.
The court wasn't told because the FBI didn't bother to follow the money. However, congressional investigators did. The House Intelligence Committee, chaired by Congressman Devin Nunes, sued Fusion GPS for its bank records and got them. The media headlines: Clinton campaign, DNC paid for research that led to Russia dossier. The date, October 24, 2017, more than a year after the dossier was given to the Crossfire Hurricane team. Coming up, was the spying on Team Trump a political hit job? Plus, a report on 51 FBI fact-checking foul-ups. That's next. Christopher Steele's track record as an FBI source isn't nearly as good as it reads in the FISA application. Somebody at the FBI embellished it. The IG identified that as another major problem. Here's why. The case for spying on Carter Page was based on Steele's third-hand information, not corroborated facts. For that reason, as the IG report states, it was important to articulate the FBI's assessment of the reliability of the source. The FBI did that in the FISA source characterization statement. Steele's past reporting has been corroborated and used in criminal proceedings. The FISA court would be impressed that Steele's work was of such a high quality that it was used in criminal proceedings. But it wasn't true.
So what is the process for supervisors fact-checking?
So under the Woods procedures, these factual accuracy procedures put in place in response to prior instances found of the failure to accurately relay information to the court, the first-line supervisor is supposed to go through and recheck the process to make sure it was done. That did not happen here.
And
on multiple occasions.
Steele has been a paid confidential human source for the FBI since 2013. FBI agent Michael Gaeta is his handler. When the IG showed Gaeta the source characterization statement, Gaeta said he did not approve the language in it, and it was the first time he'd seen it. According to Gaeta, only some of Steele's past reporting had been corroborated, and most of it had not. Gaeta added that Steele's reporting had never been used in a criminal proceeding. So the FISA court was misled about Steele's credibility. That was one of 7 significant errors and omissions in the first FISA. It was also a violation of what's called the Woods procedures.
We also found basic, fundamental, and serious errors during the completion of the FBI's factual accuracy reviews, known as the Woods procedures, which are designed to ensure that FISA applications contain a full and accurate presentation of the facts.
The IG found 51 violations of the Woods procedures in the Carter Page case. They're itemized in Appendix 1 of the IG report. Page after page of violations. Was all this really incompetence, or was it intentional? That's the subject of our next report. Was the FBI's Crossfire Hurricane investigation a political hit job? The Inspector General considered 2 questions. Question 1, did the FBI start the investigation because it was biased against Trump? Question 2, was the conduct of the investigation politically biased? The decision to start Operation Crossfire Hurricane was made by Bill Priestap. He's the FBI's Assistant Director of Counterintelligence.
And we did not find documentary or testimonial evidence that indicated political bias or improper motivation influencing his decision to open the investigation.
Horowitz needs an incriminating email, text, or confession to find bias. He found none.
It's a very deferential standard. And all he said is, people gave me an explanation and I didn't find anything to contradict it, so I don't have a basis for saying that there was improper motive. But he hasn't decided the issue of improper motive.
Now let's consider question 2. Was the conduct of the investigation politically biased? The IG found 17 significant errors and omissions in the 4 FISA cases, and 51 violations of the Woods procedures, the FBI's fact-checking system.
Although we did not find documentary or testimonial evidence of intentional misconduct, we also did not receive satisfactory explanations for the errors or the missing information and the failures that occurred.
I mean, what's the explanation? Why over time? Why would all of these people 4 times over the space of half a year deliberately mislead a federal court?
But that was precisely the concern we had, is what you lay out. There are so many errors. We couldn't reach a conclusion or make a determination on what motivated those failures.
Well, it just seems to me that it has to be one or 2 things. Either incompetence or intentional conduct.
I agree. I think it's fair for people to sit there and look at all of these 17 events and wonder how it could be purely incompetence. There is such a range of conduct here that is inexplicable.
Inexplicable? Maybe not. The IG found that the Crossfire Hurricane team was the source of many problems.
So, who ran this thing?
Peter Strzok managed the operations side of Crossfire Hurricane, according to the IG.
He's a big player in all things Crossfire Hurricane.
Strzok traded anti-Trump text messages with FBI attorney Lisa Page during the 2016 presidential campaign.
These are 2 central characters in this debacle.
Let's flash back to June 19, 2018, when Strzok testified at congressional hearings. Representative Darrell Issa had Strzok read a few of his texts.
Trump is a disaster. I have no idea how destabilizing his presidency would be.
Page said, not ever going to become president, right?
No, he's not. We'll stop it.
The IG report includes several of Strzok's anti-Trump texts. Of course, everyone's entitled to their political opinion. But in the investigation he managed, there were dozens of mistakes, not one in favor of Team Trump.
In the conduct of the investigation, it appears to me there has been intense bias. But you're not making that judgment. I understand that. You're referring that to the Attorney General, correct?
Mm-hmm. And the FBI for adjudication,
and
consideration
the FBI,
of this.
Understood.
Coming next, the criminal investigation into the FISA spying on Team Trump. The Inspector General's report concludes one of two government investigations. Here's a few key differences between them. Inspector General Michael Horowitz is a fact finder. U.S. Attorney John Durham is a prosecutor who can seek indictments. The IG had no subpoena power. Durham does have subpoena power. There are also important differences in the scope of the investigations. The Inspector General was limited to Justice Department and FBI activities. The U.S. Attorney has no such limitations. For example, he can look at what role the CIA and the State Department may have played in the spying on Team Trump.
Durham is looking at the whole waterfront. He is looking at the issue of how it got started. He's also looking at the conduct of the investigation. There are some things that were done in the investigation that are not included in Horowitz's report, and he's looking at those things.
One important focus, the crime scene at the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. This is where the FBI and Justice Department certified the FISAs were true and correct when they weren't. Will anyone face criminal charges? The simple facts are these. FBI Director James Comey signed 3 of the FISAs. Deputy Director Andrew McCabe signed the 4th. At the Department of Justice, Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates signed 2 FISAs. Her successor Dana Bente signed 1. Rod Rosenstein signed another.
Basically, they lied to the FISA court to get a surveillance warrant of an American citizen.
People at the highest level of our government took the law in their own hands.
But the Inspector General found no evidence that any of these senior officials were informed that the FISAs were false. Will U.S. Attorney Durham accept "I didn't know" as an explanation? Here's what Durham knows for a fact. Every one of these officials and many others knew the FISA spying on Carter Page gave the FBI access to Team Trump's inner circle, their phone records, text messages, emails, and more.
They used the Carter Page FISA to get his access to all the other people that he was communicating with. In essence, they were spying on hundreds of people, not just Carter Page.
These 5 officials and many others knew and approved of the continued spying on Team Trump long after it failed to find anything incriminating.
What has been described as a few irregularities becomes a massive criminal conspiracy over time to defraud the FISA court, to illegally surveil an American citizen, and to keep an operation open against a sitting president of the United States.
Spying occurred before and after the election. U.S. Attorney John Durham is investigating both time periods.
I told him that he should spend just as much attention on the post-election period. And I did that because of some of the stuff that Horowitz has uncovered. Their case collapsed after the election, and they never told the court, and they kept on getting renewals. And the question really is, what was the agenda after the election that kept them pressing ahead after their case collapsed? This is the President of the United States.
What's the agenda? Former U.S. Attorney Joe DeGenova summed it up in 4 words.
To get Donald Trump.
Crossfire Hurricane was an awful abuse of power. It took the surveillance powers designed to protect the country and used them to spy on a presidential candidate's political campaign, his administration, and innocent civilians participating in the electoral process. Let's hope that those who deserve to be prosecuted actually are. I'm John Spiropoulos. Thanks for watching One America News Investigates.